Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. J'ouvre maintenant la séance.
I'll open the call the meeting to order. Welcome to the meeting number 54 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. The House of Commons.
Hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022, and therefore members can attend in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend for a few minutes as we need to ensure that all members are able to fully participate. And pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, November 14th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of privacy concerns in relation to the ArriveCAN application. I would now like to welcome our witness today, and that is from Amazon Web Services, Inc., Nicole Foster, the Director of Global Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning, Canada Public Policy. Ms. Foster, I want to welcome you to the committee today. Monsieur Villemure, c'est pour la raison qu'on...
This is why we only have one witness. We haven't done any sound check.
The committee, and I've granted this for 7 minutes to address us at the start. And so, Ms. Foster, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm delighted to be here with you today to speak about data privacy and security and how it applies to applications that run on Amazon Web Services or AWS. Je m'appelle Nicole Foster.
My name is Nicole Foster. I'm Public Policy Director at AWS.
Public Policy at AWS, where I'm responsible for our global AI ML policy strategy, as well as our Canada Public Policy strategy. As you may know, AWS is a subsidiary of Amazon that provides on-demand cloud computing services to individuals, companies, and governments on a metered pay-as-you-go basis. The cloud refers to the on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet, such as servers and the software applications and databases that run on them. Despite their name, cloud services are physically located on the ground in data centers all over the world, including here in Canada. Organizations that use them do not need to own, run, or maintain their own physical servers or software applications. Instead, they can use the cloud to run applications on demand, paying for only what they need. AWS is the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud service provider. Millions of customers, including the fastest growing startups, largest enterprises, and leading government agencies, are using AWS to lower costs, become more agile, and innovate faster. This is all done with state-of-the-art security controls. AWS is architected to offer the most secure cloud computing services available today. We support more security standards and compliance certifications than any other cloud provider. Therefore, helping satisfy security and compliance requirements for virtually every regulatory agency around the globe. We are proud of our record in maintaining the privacy and security of Canadians, and our cybersecurity assessment reports are available to any customer. This includes our detailed assessment from the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. As you know, in early 2020, AWS was contracted by the Government of Canada through established Shared Services Canada procurement channels to work with the Canada Border Services Agency and the Public Health Agency of Canada. The objective was to help launch aspects of the pandemic response program. In the case of ArriveCAN specifically, AWS's role was to securely host the application on the AWS cloud. In addition to that, we worked with CBSA and PHAC, providing expert advisory services related to ArriveCAN's security and infrastructure architecture, including to implement the Government of Canada's standards on cybersecurity, to integrate ArriveCAN with the rest of the CBSA and PHAC ecosystems, to enable architectures and security that supported major new functionality throughout the 2.5 years since it was launched, to provide tools for CBSA to monitor the integrity of the data and support its operations, and to ensure that AWS services were configured to minimize the overall cost of AWS to Canada while supporting the ability to ensure high availability of the program to Canadians and international travelers. Mr. Chair, I'd like to further elaborate on the security and privacy measures we have in place at AWS. Security and protecting Canadian citizens' data are at the top of our priorities. La sécurité est notre
Security is our priority.
benefit from data center and network architecture that is built to meet the requirements of the most security-sensitive organizations. AWS customers in Canada can place workloads, applications, and their data in an AWS infrastructure region located here in country. Specifically, our Montreal region, we refer to a region which is a collection of data centers, enables customers to address data compliance and residency requirements. Our extensive security technologies, 24/7 monitoring and alerting, and rigorous attention to all aspects of securing AWS infrastructure are designed to ensure that customers' data can only be used by them. The services we provided for ArriveCan were architected in alignment with the security standards set by Shared Services Canada and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. Our physical data centres and on-site personnel have been inspected and assessed for compliance by Public Services and Procurement Canada's Industrial Security Directorate. And AWS personnel that worked and or continue to work on ArriveCan are all Canadian citizens and all have their reliability status, which is governed by the Treasury Board standard on security screening. AWS is vigilant about our customers' privacy and sensitive information. Mr. Chair, to be clear with you and all members of this committee, AWS personnel did not at any point in time have access to any personal data from Canadians while working on ArriveCan. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, AWS is proud to have supported our customers during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we do understand that when the public interest is at stake, additional questions may be asked. So within the confines of our agreements, I will endeavour to answer these questions to the best of my ability today. Our focus remains on providing scalable technology services with security as our highest priority. Merci pour
Thank you for your time.
your time, and I would be pleased to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Foster. And just for the sake of the committee, I did leave, and a reminder that I did leave a half hour for committee business, to which we'll be moving in camera at approximately around 6 o'clock or so. We are going to go through, Ms. Foster, I don't know if you've been before committee before. We've got 4 rounds of 6 minutes by each party, and we're going to start with Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. How much was AWS paid for work on ArriveCan?
I understand that information was provided by CBSA to the House of Commons on September 20th.
There was information provided. Some of the questions that I'm going to ask may be information the government has provided. There's been a bit of a challenge, though, with the reliability of the information that the government's provided. So I'm looking to get a confirmation with the data points that I'm seeking from you. So, and if you don't have any of the information that I'm asking, perhaps you could provide it to the committee in writing following your appearance. Would that be okay?
So any information related to a customer, we would need the consent of the customer to provide that information. But if there's specific information that the committee needs, I'm happy to go back to work with CBSA in order to provide that to you.
Okay. So are you able to tell us how much is the number that the government stated the correct number?
So, yes. So what we noted from both what was reported by journalists and what was provided to Parliament was consistent with our understanding of what was billed, yes.
Okay. And what was that number?
I believe it was approximately $4.29 million.
$4.29 million, thank you. How do you determine who's working on what? So which resources are being used on particular projects and how much to bill the client? Like how do you track that?
So in the case of how we provide those services, those are the rates in terms of those services are pre-negotiated with the Government of Canada through the Cloud Framework Agreement. So it's a standard-based price. And in terms of the skills that we're looking for, so all of our solution architects or members of the team that provided those services are experts at our cloud services, particularly experts on security services. And so the team in this case was handpicked based on the security requirements of the project.
Okay, so how do you quantify the billing units for cloud services, would that be done by minute or by gigabyte, or how would you do that?
It's complicated. So the billing of actual sort of cloud compute is done based on services as well as units of compute. So it's difficult to predict in terms of usage, but basically customers are only charged for what they actually use. So it's a consumption-based billing service. And again, the rates in this case are prearranged through the framework agreement. So it's a standard-based price again. And then in terms of the expert advisory services, those are a weekly unit.
Okay. How much business do you do with the Government of Canada when it comes to cloud services?
I don't actually have that figure. That would be a number that we would actually have to work with the customer to provide to the committee.
Okay. Would you be willing to commit to the committee to work with your customer to provide that number to us?
It would be the broader Government of Canada. So if by line department, I guess. So I'm not sure how we would do that, but I'm happy to sort of work with others to figure that out.
Okay, I appreciate that. So you also offer professional services, is that correct? As a different service to your cloud services, is that correct?
The terminology in the cloud framework agreement is advisory services.
Is that ProServe? Is that what that is?
That would be our internal marketing language, but that's.
So that's what would appear in a contract, for example. It would be described as such.
I believe the framework agreement would describe it as advisory services.
Okay, so you offer advisory services. Can you give me a very brief, 15-second example of what one of those advisory services might be?
So, I mean, I can try to kind of give you a better characterization of how that work happens. So, our ProServe team, which is our internal kind of language, never has sort of hands on the keyboard. So we don't actually do the kind of IT management services that perhaps might be more common by other types of consultants. So the advisory services are really around specific architecting of AWS services within the AWS cloud environment. And so that is sort of built in a development environment, and then the implementation or operationalization of that is done directly by the customer.
Okay, so I have the same question about the amount of advisory or ProServe businesses that AWS does for the Government of Canada as a whole. You've given an indication of what that answer might look like, though. So I have a few more questions, and I'd like to circle back to them in my next round. I've got about 55 seconds left. There's a figure, you said $4.29 million. Would cloud services, advisory services, or ProServe, would contact centers, would all of the work done through those different lines of business, would they equal a number equal to or greater to the $4.29 million? On
ArriveCan?
On ArriveCan.
I believe that, I don't know about contact center. I don't believe that it would include any contact center services related to, I'm not even sure we did contact center services.
I've got 10 seconds left. So it's possible that if there was contact center, it would not be included in the 4.29 million.
Correct.
Okay.
A different statement of work.
Can.
I'm not sure that we did provide contact center services for ArriveCan.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Foster, Mr. Barrett. I've now got Ms. Khalid for 6 minutes. Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you, Ms. Foster, for being here today. I'll start with perhaps asking in a more contextual, broad-based way. So ArriveCan, an app that we had brought in a global pandemic where we were trying to mitigate health risks to Canadians. So can you kind of walk us through what the privacy implications were for people that had downloaded the app? Was any data hijacked or hacked into? And what were your precautions as AWS for mitigating any of those privacy concerns?
So in terms of the so the role really that AWS had was less around the privacy implications in terms of the governance of data, but more really around the security of the environment. So the work that we did really revolved around ensuring that we didn't actually build the app. The app is really the tip of the iceberg, or the part that is really the user interface of ArriveCan. There's a whole bunch of things that go on underneath the app that ensure it kind of operates securely, but also that different systems are able to work together securely, so that you have that simplicity of the user interface in the app. So the role that AWS plays is really in securing the environment of the cloud, and then we provided some guidance to the Government of Canada on how to secure themselves within that environment. I have no knowledge of any breaches to our environment related to ArriveCan.
Whether it's with respect to you or any at all, do you know of any breaches that may have happened with this app?
As far as I know, there were no breaches.
Okay. Tell me, I understand this. I'm just for the benefit of Canadians. What's Shared Services Canada, and what are Protected B documents?
Sure. So Shared Services Canada is the sort of central. It's sort of a procurement agency, but not, because it sort of lives on its own within Public Services Procurement Canada. But it is the arm of the government uses to sort of supply IT services to line departments, including cloud computing services. And the second part of your question was Protected B. So Protected B and medium security data is a data classification system. So our services, for the purposes of the Cloud Framework Agreement, were evaluated as to whether or not they were provided sufficient security guardrails for that level of classified data.
Thanks for that. And so, we've heard a lot of rhetoric about hypothetical bad actors and, potential risk to Canadians and their privacy and their reasonable expectation of privacy. What implications does that whole rhetoric have on the work that you do?
I think, we're here to support customers, whether it's the Government of Canada or a bank or, other organizations. We're here to help them protect their environment and provide security. So in terms of the governance of privacy, the decisions, we help enable those customers to make the right decisions in terms of how they handle or control their own data. We're responsible for sort of helping provide the security and the environment in which to do that, and we have a number of tools that we offer and services that we offer that helps enable customers to do that.
And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but given your role with AWS and understanding what the ArriveCan app was, given the context that it was brought in for, do you think that, or what are your views on how we could have done better with the ArriveCan app? What were the shortcomings, and what were the positive points of it also?
So although I'm not appearing as an individual, I did travel with the app quite a bit. And, I have colleagues who are based in different regions around the world, and we were certainly comparing notes about all the sort of hoops we all had to jump through in order to facilitate international travel. And there was some envy about what we had in terms of the practicality of the ArriveCan app in Canada. So as a user, I appreciated the practicality of it. I found it efficient. So from that perspective, I think it was a good experience. I think that there was, from the perspective of what we were asked to deliver, I think the app was delivered securely, and it was reliable in the sense that there was no sort of inability for users to access it when they needed it.
And why do you think there's a controversy around the use of this app?
I'm not sure I could speculate. I don't, I understand that it can be a challenge for some people to adapt to new technology and accessing technology if they're not accustomed to it. So I appreciate that, I have parents too, so I appreciate the challenge for them. I also think that it was a really stressful time to try to travel, in addition to navigating a new app, testing requirements, and health concerns and anxieties. So I think it was an anxious time.
Seconds.
I just want to thank you then for being here today. And if there's any recommendations that you would like to provide to our committee, please do so now.
Be so presumptuous. Thank you.
Ms. Khalid, on va commencer avec Monsieur Villemure.
So we'll go to Mr. Villemore for 6 minutes.
You're okay, Monsieur Villemure.
Mr. Villemore, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, Madam Foster. Thank you for being here with us today. You see, I'm not a technology geek. I do use some technology, but I'm not so familiar with the level you're talking about. What are some of the competitors of AWS?
So within the Cloud Framework Agreement, there are 8 other companies that participate in terms of other organizations that offer cloud services to the Government of Canada. I'm not sure if I can rhyme all of them off by heart, but they include Google, Microsoft, ThinkOn, ServiceNow, Oracle, IBM, companies like that. Yes.
Some of the major players in the industry. Great. Earlier, you said we work a lot in the area of security. We have some tools. For me, maybe it's better to be more specific. Talk about security, your tools, what exactly you do. Right now, it seems a bit too broad.
So there's a couple of different ways of looking at that or considering that. One is looking at the broader cloud environment, which we sort of secure the cloud itself. There's also the physical security of our data centers. So, we manage the physical security of those sites and ensure that they're not at risk of natural disasters. They have access to reliable energy and not on a floodplain, things like that. So there's the physical security of the data center. There's the virtual security of the cloud. And so that really is creating a more secure environment. Excuse me. And then in terms of security tools, there is quite a lot of different security tools, but a couple of examples of those would be, for example, we have some artificial intelligence tools that are able to monitor for what might be unusual access to a customer's data or a customer's environment. So we would have systems that would alert us, and then we can alert a customer. Sometimes it turns out to be nothing. Sometimes it turns out to be something. But we have the ability to kind of use artificial intelligence to monitor and alert on those things. We also provide encryption tools, and that's probably one of the most important security tools that we offer. And so, customers always have the choice to encrypt their data, and then once it's encrypted, they also would hold the encryption keys to their data.
So, when you worked on the ArriveCAN project, the application for AWS, is it a business as usual project, or was this quite exceptional?
That's a good question. I think there's so many unique use cases for cloud services, and none of them are really quite the same. I would say that the uniqueness of this would include a couple of features. One was just the high security bar that was required for this project. I think the other thing is just the speed with which it needed to be executed with that high bar of security. So I think being able to really incorporate a number of different functionalities so quickly, I think made it unique. And then the other thing that was going on at the time was, of course, we all remember that public health guidance and policies in terms of what you needed in order to travel was changing pretty frequently. And so the ability to operationalize those changes into the technology, also at speed, also made this project somewhat unique.
Was this a huge team of employees that worked on this project?
No, not huge. I think there was a number of people who were kind of brought in very quickly to support, but it wasn't a huge team, no.
Okay. In an article on the web, we heard about a partner named Fortinet. Could you tell us a bit more about them?
In terms of involvement on ArriveCAN? Oh,
who are they and their application?
I don't have any knowledge of direct work with Fortinet, sorry.
Well, this article was on Amazon's site, so these are not frequent collaborators.
Oh, so I'm not sure about directly related to ArriveCAN, but in terms of, we work with a number of different partners who help customers, I think, to implement services or to manage different aspects of projects that they might have. So it can include companies like that. It includes companies such as Accenture, Deloitte would be other examples. We work with a number of different companies that help our customers adopt the technology.
Les gens ont les mêmes exigences.
And do people have the same requirements in terms of privacy, protection of privacy?
I think it would vary depending on the project and what the requirements of that specific project were.
Les serveurs
You mentioned somewhat at the beginning. Is it strictly here in Canada or mostly here?
Sorry, is what strictly in
Est-ce que les
Canada?
serveurs étaient situés
Were these servers situated exclusively in Canada?
Data center infrastructure all over the world, and we enabled the customer, in this case, ArriveCan, to be able to do the whole project within Canada. But in terms of what they ultimately decided, that would be up to the Government of Canada to determine where they put their data. So the customer has full control over how they actually operationalize in the cloud.
Il est possible.
So it's possible that some may not be in Canada.
Wouldn't be a mystery as to what the Government of Canada chose. It would be up to the Government of Canada to give you that information, but it is enabled to exist completely in Canada.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Monsieur Villemure.
Thank you, Mr. Villemont.
We're going to go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes, and Mr. Green is online, Nicole, just so you know. Okay. Mr. Green.
Ms. Foster, you are the Director of Canadian Public Policy, is that correct?
Yeah, for AWS, yes.
For AWS. What's the total contracts with AWS and the Government of Canada?
So that question was asked earlier. I don't know the total dollar value of Government of Canada contracts.
You don't know, or you're unwilling to provide it to committee?
No, I honestly don't know. I would be willing to work with first of all, it would be something that the customer would need to provide. It's not something.
But you
that
are the
we would
Director
provide.
of Canada Public Policy for the Canadian arm of the company?
I'm correct, but I'm not the Director of Sales.
So you don't know what your department's total contracts are with Canada?
My department within the organization.
Okay, what's your department's total contracts with the Government of Canada?
My department is public policy. We have $0 of contracts with the Government of Canada.
How much does AWS contract with the Government of Canada?
So I don't know that number, and we would defer to the customer to provide that information. We wouldn't
Ms.
disclose
Foster,
customer information.
this is a government committee for the Parliament of Canada. We have the ability to send for documents and evidence. You have a duty of candor to this committee to answer questions truthfully. You're not here to do the government's work. You're here to answer questions. So within the $4.29 million contract you have for ArriveCan, was it just for ArriveCan or was it for multiple projects?
That specific amount is related specifically to ArriveCan.
So within that, I've heard you answer in very roundabout ways. I'm going to ask you for some more direct answers. You said a number of people were involved with the contract. How many specifically were involved with the contract?
So our services are not contracted to a specific individual or a specific, specific.
How many
consultants.
individuals were involved in the project?
I believe it was between 20 and 30. I don't have the exact number.
How many partners were involved in the project?
We did not have, there was one partner involved at the very initial discussion, but most of the work was done in direct contract with the Government of Canada. We did not work with partners on this project.
Did you work on the development of the initial version of ArriveCan?
No, we did not develop the app in any way.
So when you were receiving the initial version of the app, when you were developing on the application, building it with the purpose of collecting COVID-19 data, what type of work would have gone into it to improve it from its initial stage?
So we didn't build the app. We were involved in helping architect the security infrastructure that supports the app. And then the app itself also ran on our cloud infrastructure. So The specific types of work that we did was really to help the Government of Canada implement its standards on cybersecurity, the integration of ArriveCan, of the app, with the rest of CBSA's and PHAC's ecosystems. We enabled architectures and security that supported major new functionalities throughout the 2.5 years since it was launched. So that
that'll
was
suffice.
related
Thank
to.
you. That'll suffice. How much, if you were to put in like a quantify the amount of data that was stored, how much data would have been stored for $4.29 million?
I don't have that information in terms of the quantity of data stored. I know that there was public information around the number of users that downloaded the app, but I don't have it in terms of a quantifiable amount of data.
Would that not have fallen into any reporting that would have happened internally with AWS?
No, not reporting that I would normally see.
Ms. Foster, are you the correct person to be in front of this committee to be answering these questions in this moment?
That's really up to you.
Well, it's up to, I guess, the quality of the answers that we get. What I'm looking for is, did you didn't do any types of updates at all? You were just simply hosting. 20 or 30 people were involved in the project at any given time. Is that correct?
I'm really not sure what you're asking. Can you clarify your question?
I'm asking you to confirm what you've just
Was there
summarized.
20 or 30 people involved in the project in terms of providing advisory services? Correct. Yes.
Okay. Have you ever had any breaches, any data breaches within Amazon AWS services?
Within this specific use case, there was no data breaches.
Within any use case, have you ever had breaches?
Related
AWS?
to the AWS environment? No, not that I'm aware
Never
of.
had any personal data breaches at all?
Related to the AWS cloud? No.
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We're now going to start the second round, and I'm going to return back to Mr. Barrett. You've got 5 minutes, Mr. Barrett.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So to pick up a little on where Mr. Green was, I would be interested in more precision, and I do appreciate that you've undertaken to work with your client to provide global numbers with respect to all of the work or possible work that was done on ArriveCan, including professional services, contact centers, and cloud computing. So that's so we can leave that there for now, I suppose. What would the type of work that would be completed at the contact centers that I've referenced on a project like this, if it were to have been used, which you were unsure if it had been?
Yeah. So I'm not sure that we worked with this particular customer on a contact center. So so we do provide contact center solutions. We essentially provide the building blocks to stand up a virtual contact center for customers. And so we did, for example, work on other government projects that were related to contact centers, but I don't know specifically if we did one related to ArriveCan.
Okay. And the type of information that would be available when you're billing your client would include all of the details that would line up with the contract. So how your base costs, your the time worked on the app. Would you include like billable hours? Is that something that would be included?
I believe that the services are actually billed by week rather than by hour, and the way that our advisory services work is it's outcome based as opposed to design some specific coding for a specific thing. So it would be broader parameters in terms of requirements that the customer would have, and then we would work to design or architect based on an outcome that was required as opposed to a specific kind of part of the project, if that makes sense. So the benefit of that to the customer is that a lot of our customers don't maybe have the full expertise and understanding how to leverage those services effectively or efficiently, which security, for example, which security services may be of most value to them in their context to meet their governance standards. So we would be able to, I think, have a little bit more creative license in driving that solution based on the experts that we have within our company to produce those outcomes for the customer.
So we've discussed a kind of a suite of services that AWS is able to provide. In previous discussions or papers that have been released from the government, it's been noted that there were other options for the government to pursue in terms of subcontractors or vendors on this project. Is design something that's in the wheelhouse of Amazon? Is that does AWS have a design department? Is that a service that you offer?
What kind of design are you referring?
App design.
No, we don't. We don't do that.
Okay. So the totality of the services that you were able to provide, you did provide on this project.
I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry.
So your company competed in a bidding process for the work that you received. Is that correct?
So we competed to be part of the framework agreement. So as part of the framework agreement, line departments can procure up to a certain threshold in terms of service, but there's a ceiling to that threshold, and then once you exceed or expect to exceed that threshold, there's a sort of secondary phase of procurement that would become more competitive to ensure that the government was using the sort of most transparent means to procure those services.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. We're now going to go to Ms. Hepner, who is online. Nicole. Oh, I've got. Oh, so we're going to go to Ms. Khalid. Yes. Okay, Ms. Khalid, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up on what Mr. Barrett was speaking about. Ms. Foster, can you outline for us in very layman's terms, because I think a lot of people may not understand, what did Amazon Web Services do specifically in the ArriveCAN app within that framework? What was your role?
So again, it's really supporting the underlying infrastructure that supports the app. So if we think about other apps that maybe we're more familiar with, like say Uber, you put in your address and like magic, a car appears and arrives at your door and takes you to your destination. You don't even have to speak to the driver. So all of that simplicity is supported by a whole lot of other back-end technology that makes that happen, from GPS to fastest route to how you're paying for this service. You can split your bill. So all that underlying infrastructure that supports the simplicity of the user interface has to be built. In the case of ArriveCAN, it was using a lot of other aspects of infrastructure that are less obvious in terms of what you're seeing in the app. So, for example, you upload your vaccination certificate. The app has to be able to read and verify that certificate, and it has to be able to do it in multiple languages. You might remember that Ontario, for example, changed its vaccination documentation halfway through all of this. So it has to be able to read the document and be able to verify that it's a real document. Another piece of infrastructure that has to be supported by the app was some of the accessibility features, which were the ability to go from text to talk. So that is another machine learning application that was enabled in the app. It also had to be able to speak to other aspects of CBSA's infrastructure or PHAC's infrastructure in terms of data that it was verifying in real time once you upload your information in the app, and as well as boarding information and your travel information. So there was a number of pieces that needed to speak to each other in the simplicity of being able to interface with the app.
Thanks for that. So, I mean, it's a government contract with respect to the ArriveCan app. Is there like public disclosure? Is this listed on your website? Like, how do you let the public know how much the government of Canada has paid you to do all of this?
So in the case of all of our customers, we protect customer confidentiality, and so we would never, proactively disclose that information without customer consent. So it'd really be up to our customers to choose to share that information.
Now, is any of this information, to your knowledge, shared publicly on any website, whether it's a government website or your own?
In terms of the dollar amounts?
Yes.
So my understanding is, based on my preparations to be here today, I'm not sure if it's available online, but I know that there was documentation made available to this committee, which we were able to view and verify.
And are you satisfied with the privacy framework, the privacy policy that AWS has in place, not just for the ArriveCan app, but for all of its programming, all of its apps in general?
So really the decisions around the governance of privacy and how data should be managed are really decisions that the customer has to make. And so our role is really to enable those decisions. So our job is to help our customers operationalize privacy and meet their own standards or standards that they have to operate within. So our job is really to provide the tools in order to govern data the way that the customer wants to govern its data. We're very aware of our own sort of security parameters and ensuring that we're not ensuring that we're able to protect customer privacy and data, and that they feel that they are able to do so securely within the AWS cloud.
And are you satisfied, or are you aware of what the Government of Canada's privacy framework was with respect to this specific procurement?
So we weren't involved in the privacy aspects of those decisions. We were involved in helping integrate the security concerns or the cybersecurity standards of that. We certainly can architect to what the government needs, but the government really would have been directing and making those decisions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Foster. Thank you, Ms. Khalid. On va continuer.
So we'll continue with Mr. Villemure for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Villemure, thank you, Chair. Ms. Foster, I mentioned Fortinet earlier. I have an article on the website of Amazon. It said the application was done with AWS and their partner, Fortinet. Did you have several partners work with you on this application?
I'm very sorry. I'm not aware of Fortinet's role on this particular piece of work.
Est-ce qu'il y avait d'autres?
Were there other partners on the application?
At the very initial stages of work, we were engaged with a partner, and then that partner, that partner sort of was no longer involved in the work, and we contracted directly with the Government of Canada.
Qui était le partenaire?
Who was the partner and why are they no longer involved?
I think it was just in terms of the simplicity of being able to contract directly and work directly with AWS was just what was needed with the project. And the partner's name was a company called Dalian.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que
Thank you. In the framework of ArriveCan, is there always some billing that comes in later, or is everything finished?
No, it's not finished. So in terms of, in a normal course of work in terms of engaging the cloud, you'll often see sort of a heavier amount of the need for those advisory services at the beginning of a mandate, just to sort of get things up and running and as you build. In terms of the cloud utility, the app is still functional today. So it's still running on AWS infrastructure, and it continues to run on AWS infrastructure, but the billing for that is based on its actual usage. So it's based on the volume of users using the app and the activity of those services.
Les données
And the data are preserved for how long?
I'm sorry, I missed something in the
les,
interpretation there.
The data of ArriveCan users, for how long do you preserve them?
It's preserved until the Government of Canada does something else with it. So it remains there until the Government of Canada either moves the data, deletes the data.
donc
So the ongoing billing is for use, and it's for the $4.2 million. That's it?
My apologies. I'm not quite sure I'm getting the
D'accord.
gist of your question in the interpretation. So the billing, the majority of the billing, I think at the front end of the contract under the framework agreement would be related to advisory services. The advantage of using cloud is that you can scale up or scale down depending on the level of your use. So, in the case of anything that has peaks and valleys in terms of demand, you're only paying for what you use, and you're able to scale up to a level that's quite high without having had to procure servers on your own. So, in the case before the cloud, basically what we had is if you were the government.
I'm sorry, but we're 3.5 minutes in
I'm
right
sorry.
now, so that's okay. I know once you get on a roll there, but I am going to go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes. I apologize, Ms. Foster. The thing I hate most about being chair is having to cut people off. But Mr. Green, yeah, Mr. Green.
Ms. Foster, when a contract like this is procured, I'm to understand that $4.29 million had been utilized. What would have been the top end threshold before you would have had to have gone back and renegotiate?
So all of that is really managed by the customer in terms of how they procure. So we follow the Government of Canada's procurement process, or we work with the customer to follow their process. So in the case of, I didn't bring those figures with me, but I believe I would like to have the opportunity to correct this if I get it wrong, but I believe that for utility compute, the initial threshold is $4.5 million. And then I believe for statements of work, in terms of it, there are different streams for advisory services, but I believe it's $500,000 per service.
So, the government, I think, assumed that this was going to be used perhaps more than it was in terms of downloaded and actual usage, given the amount of money that has been invested into this particular product and its storage. Are you suggesting that you just reached the max threshold of your procurement and then stopped in coincidence with the amount of usage?
Well, there would be timelines associated with that number. So it depends. I think it depends on when the project was initiated and concluded, or on a per annual basis. So I can't speak to the government's procurement
earlier
process.
in my last round, you probably heard some frustration in terms of whether or not, we selected the right representative from Amazon to be able to answer these questions. We're here after the house has risen. Everybody's, ostensibly done for the year. We're here trying to get to the heart of the matter, and yet you're unable to provide what I consider to be very basic information to this committee for the good and welfare of our report. So I'm wondering, is there somebody that else situated within the company that might be better situated to invite back to this committee who might have some of the answers to the questions we're asking?
So it depends on the question that you're asking. Some of the disclosures you're asking for would really be up to a customer to provide you with that information. As a service provider, we wouldn't disclose customer information.
You would be directed to provide that through the House of Commons, through our parliamentary privileges.
I understand that, but I would have to respect the confidentiality of the agreement that we have with the Government of Canada and wait for that disclosure to be requested through those channels.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Ms. Foster. And for the benefit of Mr. Green, we did invite others, and Ms. Foster was the one that was put in front of the committee. So I just want to make that clear. I am going to now move to Mr. Couric, I believe. Mr. Couric for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Foster, for your testimony here today. Just one quick quick clarification question following up with what Mr. Green suggested and some earlier answers. There's that secondary procurement trigger that you talked about. I'm to understand from your testimony that that was not triggered in the case of the ArriveCan services provided. Am I correct on that?
That would be my understanding, yes.
Okay. So look, I think that all members of this committee want to make sure that we're getting answers about what all took place around the $54 million that the government spent on in large part procuring services and different arrangements related to the ArriveCan study. So that's really the focus of why there's, I think, so many questions, and specifically related to this committee, some of the privacy concerns related to that. And I have a few more questions that we might get to, but I think that in order to get some clarity around some of the issues that are left outstanding, certainly after the first few rounds of questions, Mr. Chair, I would move the following motion, and it was just sent to the church to the clerk in. And it's been a long fall session, and in both official languages, Madam Clerk, to ensure that that is respected in for those who speak both languages around the table. I will read the motion, however, into the record in English. I'll spare you all my French. The motion would be that the committee order Amazon Web Services provide the committee a copy of all invoices, timesheets, reports, data usage, briefs, and memoranda related to the development, implementation, and maintenance of the ArriveCan application. That this request include all cloud computing services, professional services, cybersecurity assessments, and contact centers. That these documents be sent to the clerk within 3 weeks of the adoption of this motion, and that these documents be circulated to committee members and made available on the committee's website as soon as is possible in both French and English.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Couric. I'm just going to confirm with the clerk that the motion has been passed on to other members of the committee in both official languages as well. Okay, so Mr. Couric has moved this motion. Ms. Foster, I'm going to ask you to just hang still for a sec here. Is there any discussion on the motion? Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thanks so much, Chair. I know I've said this so many times, and I just hate to be a broken record. It's kind of sucky to be taken by surprise in all of this, but if I would ask your indulgence then, perhaps for me to take an actual read and look into the motion, and if I can ask you, perhaps, Chair, with your indulgence, to suspend for about 5-10 minutes for us to be able to look and to review and to see what exactly the motion is asking for at this point. Again, Chair, okay, it would not happen if we were not taken by surprise all the time in this committee.
I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett before I decide on maybe within Mr. Barrett's intervention, you can find some time to look at the motion so that we can deal with it. Mr. Barrett, if you want to go ahead, please.
Yeah, Chair. No, I was just going to say that the necessity for that information arose out of the testimony from the witness, that there's ambiguity with respect to the information that different members have requested, and so that's why the motion is moved. And if Ms. Khalid or others need a couple minutes to take a look at it, I think that's fine.
Ms. Khalid, go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, and I haven't looked at the text of the motion yet, so please excuse me if this sounds ignorant, but I'm just wondering if all of the documents that are requested are actually in the control of AWS, and whether there are any NDAs, et cetera, that, well, what I'm asking ultimately is whether we are able to receive them by requesting them from AWS, or do we need to request other agencies for whatever documents it is that the Conservatives want?
I think that's a fair question. I don't I don't have an answer for that, and I don't know how practical that is. We can only deal with the motion that's in front of us and the request by Mr. Couric to the committee to have these documents produced. So I am going to, if you need a little more time with this, let's look at 2 or 3 minutes if we can, because I do want to continue, and I don't want to hold Ms. Foster too long, because I know she's got likely have some more questions that are going to come as a result of the committee. So I'm going to suspend for 2 minutes while we look over this motion, and then we'll come back. 2 minutes. We're going to resume the meeting. We've got a motion that was put on the floor by Mr. Couric. Everyone has the motion. I'm looking at the motion. If this information is not not able to be provided to the committee, then I'm sure that, or some of this information, then I'm sure there's some rationale or some reason that Amazon can provide if need be. But is there any discussion on this motion? Go ahead, Mr. Green. I see your hand.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, that is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, do you want to take a vote on that? The motion is to adjourn the meeting. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
The motion to adjourn the meeting, moved by Mr. Green. Mr. Baines.
I vote yes.
Monsieur Fergus.
Oui, je vote oui.
Ms. Hefner.
Yes.
Ms. Khalid.
Yes.
Ms. Sachs. Yes. Mr. Barrett.
No.
Monsieur Gould. No. Mr. Couric.
No. No.
Monsieur Villemur.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, nays 3, yeas 7.
Okay, thank you. So the motion has passed. Before we do end and adjourn this meeting, on behalf of the committee, I want to say thank you, Madam Clerk, for the work that you've done, to our analysts, to all of our technicians. Ms. Foster, I want to thank you for making an appearance today before the committee on behalf of the committee and on behalf of Canadians. And I do wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah. This meeting is adjourned.
Happy holidays, everyone.